Hey there YouTube, I'm Yukitsu, this is the Yukitsu Times. Welcome to my channel, welcome to a little bit of Endless Space 2. So we're going to be talking a little bit about the Vodyani's unique ships here, as well as how to use their military effectively. Now the Vodyani are a decent conquest faction, and part of that is going to have to do with the type of ships that they've got available. And there are sort of always two ways to build your ships. There's ones where you're planning on going out and invading other people, and there are strategies where you're going and defending your own systems, whether that be across large distances like in this playthrough, or across much shorter distances like in other playthroughs. So in any event, let's start by talking a little bit about some of the details that are kind of tangential. So first of all, laws. The Vodyani do not have easy access to the powerful laws to influence their fleets. As you'll notice, I don't have really that much in Industrial to get access to Fleet Fortitude. There's no way in hell we're getting mines bigger, and it's unlikely under most playthroughs to get the Deadly Intent build before the game ends. So in the case of an emergency where you just need to buff up your ships, very difficult to do that with laws as the Vodyani. What they do have access to are heroes. The Vodyani starting hero in particular, the one that you're guaranteed to have, is a very, very good military hero. He has that much desirable Guardian trait there, which means that he's got access to things like Battlefield Grandmaster. He's got access to post-relativistic targeting, which are the main two from that tree. He's also got access, of course, to Iron Discipline. So that combination, of course, makes them really good. But Vodyani heroes as well are some of the best in the game for military. They've got access to the Burning Light skill, which is plus 40% energy weapon damage on fleet. So every ship in your fleet there, they've got plus 6 to movement, and they've got plus 25% health to the fleet. These are fantastic abilities for a military leader, and broadly speaking do skew the Vodyani a little bit further towards the energy weapon side of things, because you're guaranteed to have a general that you can throw into a fleet that's good at using that. I do think that actually you should almost always go for that particular type of hero. I just have to do some modification here because it's going to come up later. But yeah, the Vodyani, I think you generally speaking always go with the energy type weapons. There are some circumstances where you might want to go missiles. It's going to depend on your opponents, what they're sort of using, what their defenses are, but I think these guys work really, really well with lasers as their primary source of damage, rather. Now, the other thing about the Vodyani is they do not have any questline bonuses to their ships that make their ships more powerful, other than Sainted Speed, which is not really a great mid or late game bonus. It's just basically a better speed module that adds a little bit of hit points. The thing that is quite decent about the Vodyani questline is that if you do manage to complete it, and it is a fairly difficult one to complete, it does give you access to the ability to move your heroes freely, which means you can throw them into a fleet, move them into another fleet to defend a different system, so you can get just this one guy defending a lot of different systems under some circumstances. This is not necessarily an easy quest to complete, though. I find it to be one of the worst ones in the game in terms of having to sort of do weird things. For example, in our case, we'd have to go all the way here and colonize that. It wasn't, when we initially got the quest, it was not colonized by other people. That's too far away for me to really have to deal with, or want to have to deal with it. So that's the one downside to that, but if you do gain access to it, you can switch around your heroes quite quickly. We're actually going to move this guy into here for now. But yeah, that's broadly speaking how you're going to deal with emergency situations. If you absolutely have to buff a fleet, you're defending, and you see like a massive invasion fleet of Cravers or something like that heading your way, you can't enact laws to protect yourself. You're going to have to use your heroes. So next up, let's talk about the individual ships here. Now, the first one we want to just mention in passing here is their scout ship. The scout ship is reasonable in terms of combat ability. It's not the best in the game, it's not the worst in the game, and it's what you're probably going to use against early game pirates under normal circumstances. The reason that you're probably going to also rely on this for quite some time is that the military class of ship here is not much better. It is a stronger ship here with 2 extra defensive slots and 500 extra hit points, as well as the sort of bonuses that you get from small attackers, but that's not a humongous bonus considering the tech investment in the early game. So unless you're being pressured by a militant race on your border, you're going to, generally speaking, be able to rely heavily on your scouts for some time. Now, once you do upgrade to the first tier of military ship, I do find that this is an okay model. There's nothing too inherently wrong with it. What's nice about this one is that it does have a decent amount of defense to it. So if you are just defending your borders, and you do have access to titanium, and you are not really concerned with getting higher tier tech, this is a pretty functional design, and what's more, you can use it without another ship defending it. The one problem with this, of course, is that it only has the average number of 3 slots for offense, and there are plenty of ships out there that also have 3 slots for offense, so there's nothing really that bad about having that. but you can't get away with the sort of strategies that you might have if you had the 4-slot offense type ships out there. Broadly speaking, since you don't need defenders for this, you could just build giant fleets consisting entirely of this guy. It means that you're not wasting a slot in your fleet. Let's say that you've got a fleet capacity of 4. If you had a more dedicated attacker, you might want to have, say, 3 attackers and 1 defender. That would give you a total of 13 guns. If you just have 4 attackers for the Vodyani, you'd have 12 guns, which is close. You wouldn't be super far behind, and you'd be just about as effective. Not necessarily my favorite model of ship for the Vodyani. I do think that they should be moving up to the mediums, but if you don't have access to adamantium, this is going to be your attacking ship. Next up is the Toy Sam. This is actually a fantastic model of ship, and the big reason that you're not going to see this is because the Vodyani middle tier ship, the medium defender, is the literal best medium defender in the game. This guy is pretty much good at every sort of thing that you would want a protector to be good at. You can either make him incredibly durable with that sort of versatility of these 2 split slots here, and the 1 split slot even if you're not using the upgraded version, as well as a lot of utility modules if you would prefer to have those utility modules. So this thing can do a little bit of either of those roles there, and in fact quite a lot of either of those 2 roles. If you're looking for just flat-out fleet acceleration and you've got tons of Hyperium and Quadronics or something like that, you can make your fleets move really fast with these guys because you can fit so many of them into a fleet, and they can cram in so many utility modules. They'll, of course, suffer a bit in terms of missile defense just because they've only got 1 attack slot, but there are ways to make this thing quite potent at its job, and it is a pretty decent ship here. Again, the only reason that you're not going to see this is because the medium coordinator is the literal best medium coordinator in the game, which is a bit of a shame because this is a pretty good model and there are some things that you can do with it, but I practically never focus on building too many of these and I never get the upgrade. Next up, we've got the Giant class here. This is the medium scale attacker. Again, we're going to find that this thing has got plenty of defense slots here. It has 5 attack slots, which is pretty much the standard out there, but it does only start with 3. It is pretty common for these vehicles to start with 3 attack slots, or it starts with 2, or it starts with 4. Anywhere around that sort of number is going to be pretty common. 3 attack slots, however, is weaker than 3 of your small attackers, so if you've got no access to adamantium and you don't have any intention of getting any, the small ships are superior to this one. Once you've got the access to the adamantium, however, this is equivalent to 4 of your smaller ships there. A little bit more, actually, because of the higher percentage bonus. But in addition to that, it has a crap ton of defensive modules. Again, this is a ship that can operate independently. It does not necessarily require a support ship to sort of bolster up its defenses. However, its lack of utility slots means that it's going to be quite bad at planetary invasions, and it's going to be incredibly immobile under normal circumstances. So this is a ship class that you're going to want to consider if you're looking at shorter distances, or you want to have it be supported by some sort of protector or coordinator. A pretty good all-arounder type ship. It's the one that I will usually go to for my offensive capabilities with the Vodyani, and the sort of leap from the 9 weapon slots on the small ships for 3 command points to the 12 weapon slots that you get on this thing, again, small slot equivalents, means that this thing is substantially more powerful. So if you can switch to these, always do. Next up, we've got access to the Leaden class, and again, like I mentioned, this is the most powerful medium coordinator in the game. It's good at really anything that you want it to be good at. It is even good at offense. 5 weapon slots is as much as most medium hunters, which means that you could theoretically use this as a DPS ship if you really wanted to. If you just happen to have loads of antimatter, for example, and you don't have access to any adamantium, you could use this guy just as your damage ship if you really, really wanted to. Ideally speaking, though, you take these guys as defenders and you sort of support your other ships in your fleet there. Can be used as a pocket carrier, but since it lacks any sort of bonuses to carrier capacity, not really the best use of a ship here. 100 firepower from this thing, by contrast to if I threw in, say, this laser here, 328 from that laser there. So, yeah, I did actually put in some carrier modules for this particular the fleet that I'll be using as an example, but I might take them out just for example's sake. In any event, though, a really, really great all-around design. It's got some flexibility in terms of how much defense it can have, as well as how many utility slots it can have. It has, like, amazing missile defense there. and is capable of just absolutely using its flak fields to completely shred apart any sort of missile attacks that are being thrown towards your fleet there. Like the total flak defense on this design here as a defender module means that even if you're up against fairly scary missile flotillas, you're probably going to survive getting in close just fine. Good amount of defensive modules here with the option to have that fifth one there. It's not a truly impressive amount of defensive modules or anything like that, but there's nothing wrong with 5 of them. Utility modules as well, and you can design these for either planetary offense or you can use them for system defense, focusing more on the defensive slots. And they can also, of course, be used with the rest of your fleet to just accelerate your fleet around and make them move more quickly. So great design. You can decide, like the way you configure this thing is really going to be how you is going to depend on whether or not you're going for conquest or whether you're going for defense. If you're going for defense, of course, you don't care as much about mobility and stuff like that. You're probably going to use this extra utility slot here for more armor and more shielding and stuff like that. And you're probably going to also use this attack slot for a weapon. Whereas if you're going for planetary invasion, you're probably looking to use these as utility slots here, just so that you can move your fleet around faster as well as destroy planets a little bit faster. So that's going to generally be the differentiation between the two different models. And even if you don't have antimatter, just get antimatter, because this ship is such a huge step up from the Toy Sam that you're going to want to use this ship no matter what. Next up, we've got the Ortam class. Now, this is a bit of a vanity project. I generally find that carriers, unless you're in a faction that has really, really crappy ships otherwise, is just unnecessary. You don't ever need to use these carriers here. Still, this is a very good model of a carrier. It's sort of third in terms of carrier weapon capacity, with the United Empire and the Sophons being ahead of it, as well as being, I think, one of the better actual carriers, if I recall correctly, having 5 slots for that. This can be used if you're going for that carrier strategy, which is not one I would recommend necessarily. This thing does, on the other hand, have a lot of weapon slots as well. These can be used for a ridiculous amount of damage here. And if you have got the ability to sort of load this thing out, you can get scary, crazy amounts of damage from it. If we take a look at this here. Like, this is what broadly could be considered, like, too much damage. Like, this is so much damage. In terms of whatever is facing down against this thing would be pretty intimidated. But you'd have to have the quadronics and the orichalcics, and then the weapons research. You'd end up going through so many techs to get to this point that you can reliably take these, that you'll probably have almost won the game. In fact, I've recently unlocked this particular model, and we're like 3 turns away from winning the game, I think, based on economy. So it's unlikely that you're ever in practice going to use this ship here. Now, if it doesn't have the upgrade, this thing only has these 4 weapon slots, and this is a doubled one, but still, it's 4, 8, 12, plus 8. You're looking at 20 weapon slots here for 6 command points. That means that if you don't have the orichalcics, quadronics, and the last tier upgrade for the ship here, it does less damage than 2 of your mediums. So, broadly speaking, ignore this ship. It is just for glory points and for showing off or something like that. It's not really that practical a ship. And that's going to basically, be the story for most carriers in the game. So anyway, let's take a quick look at our fleet composition that we got over here. I'm actually going to do a quick look as well at our types of ships here. So this is the brand that we've got designed here. It has a little bit of invasion potential that's a little bit unnecessary in this case, but we have got it just in case we need it. For anti-piracy duty is what I was mostly using it for. Oops. I was mostly using it to just wipe out pirate bases, but we are going for that energy weapon sort of damage per second style there. It has got access to that plasma intensifier in that slot there, and you'll notice that since I'm so short on utilities that I haven't bothered putting any utilities for speed in this particular ship here. Got 1 shield because I've got a pretty decent kind, and I'm more worried about kinetics in this particular playthrough. But you can sort of vary that up. We're using the improved sync laser because that's what I've got access to in this particular playthrough. I could be using the basic Hellray laser, and that would be fine if we didn't have access to the Hyperion, which we do. Next up, we've got the shield, and again, we're focusing our fleet very heavily on medium-sized ships. Now, I'm actually going to switch out a little bit here. I'm going to actually move these into here. But if we take a look at the design in general here, 2 support modules with speed. This is why we don't have any speed modules on our other ships there. We're focusing this again on primarily close range defenses and stuff like that. We could actually go a little bit more defensive even and get rid of this thing, but I was using this to batter down some pirate strongholds, so a little bit of siege capability was required in this particular case. We've got this much speed because we have a very broad empire that we have to defend. We've got lots of defenses from kinetic there. We've got a decent amount of shields and armor. This thing's actually pretty durable, but not actually as durable necessarily as our hunter in some respects there. Loads and loads of hit points. It's a tough ship. It's got a lot going for it in just general there. I do really like this sort of design. Anyway, let's go ahead and apply that design there. Take a look next at one more type of ship that we haven't discussed earlier. You're broadly not going to use these in combat, but the Arcs are actually a viable combat ship. They can get up to that 17,264 damage. That's comparable to a carrier. It's not quite as good as a carrier in terms of combat, but it does have way more utility modules, so you could make this thing really, really fast or something like that. It's an all-around okay ship. It's just that you're so restricted in how you get these, and the fact that you kind of need them for other things, that you're probably not going to use them very often in combat. Now, I have actually used them in fights before where I've gotten full stacks of arcs just for the fun of it. Not super practical, but it is super fun to do. It's actually a pretty okay way to do things if you have access to all of these utility slots and just use them on planetary invasion stuff to instantly wipe out an enemy planet. And then just plant down an arc and then use the time that you've got to build a new arc to replenish that fleet, and then just continue stomping through your opponent with like your arc fleet. It's kind of hilarious, but in any event, it's kind of a unique ship. It's probably not going to be too important for you to know about too much. Anyway, let's go ahead and hit back here, take a look at my fleet composition. So I've moved my Vodyani hero into this fleet here, and I've gone for a combination of 3 shields, which is going to be enough to support each lane, and we've got 5 brands, which is what I can afford right now. If I had a higher fleet command point, I would go for more, because the shields are sort of defense in each lane, and once you've got that amount of defense, you don't really need more. If I was going for planetary invasion, however, I would have more shields because I would need those extra support slots. So anyway, let's move down here and fight another fleet. This is also a 24 stack with a hero, so theoretically we're matched, but I do recall me having a slightly higher tech value, so I should be ahead on that. So let's go ahead and take a look here. And you can see that we're actually ridiculously ahead of these guys. Now, one of the things about having this flagship in here is that this guy's increasing our energy damage by a kind of ridiculous amount. It's not showing up here, but we have over 8,000. Going to go into advanced here. We're going to go with hard target. We do have access to this bigger is better, but not really something that we need to do here. Now, this is 100% extra damage, but we don't necessarily have the type of ship composition for that. Anyway, what we want to do is actually have our ships so that we've got 1 defender in each lane. I don't necessarily want to have that many ships loaded up in this one. So yeah, this is going to be a lot of ships that are capable of dealing a lot of damage to our opponents. So let's see how this works here. In general, laser ships for DPS your DPS ships are going to dictate the range that you decide to engage at. If we take a look at our opponent, I have checked out this fight before. They're using a mix of energy kinetic as well as their carrier is a carrier, so lots of fighters and stuff like that. There's no range that's optimal against this because most of its damage is actually from its fighters and carrier capacity. For this long ship over here, energy weapons, so medium range is going to be effective for them as well. They've got access to a missile ship here, so they're going to want to go long range with that one. Another long range there, so they're going to want to be at long range. They're going to... It could potentially be good for us to actually go close range, but I don't think that that's really the case here. Anyway, let's take a look at their disposition. They've got a lot in the center here. All offense, really. A little bit defenders and a little bit of attackers in the top there, and then their carrier, as well as some other stuff in the bottom here. So theoretically, their carrier should be able to crush one of my medium attackers in terms of DPS, but that shouldn't matter in this particular instance here. Although, admittedly, we've got 8,136 attack on our medium ship, and there's 2 medium ships in this lane, so kind of, yeah, that hero's ability kicked in, and we've got now quite a lot more attack, so... Let's see how this goes. And we are going to watch this on overview just so that my computer doesn't completely die, and also so that we can better analyze what's going on here. We should end up in medium in all lanes here because these the top one here is medium to long, so we'll close to medium, and then we got long to medium. So the only one lane is going to start in medium range. We can see that that is the case here. Or rather, I haven't warped in yet, so we don't have that little icon yet. Alright, so we should see the range icons pop up to show us a little bit of that information there. You can see that we're starting long, long, and medium. That's going to be fine for us in general here. So, yeah, a lot of firepower heading out, looks like towards that hero for some reason, which is probably going to die like immediately. In our lane over here, we're taking some shots on, it looks like our defender. I can see its shields flaring up from various shots there. And over here we can see a couple shots being spread around and a couple shots being concentrated. So I'm guessing our protector is just spraying shots at random across these little guys over here. But that seems to be working just fine. And you can see how quickly like all of their stuff is dying. Yeah, this is kind of absolutely crazy how fast that happens, just in terms of the sheer amount of damage. And the fact that I don't think I really took very much damage from them, including from that carrier. Yeah, Vodyani fleet is just really, really powerful if you know how to sort of arrange it, and it really does benefit tremendously from that medium defender. So let's take a look at the advanced statistics here. So they were able to deal, let's see here, laser weapons dealt 11,340. Let's see here, I can't really get this. Actually, let's do this because that sort of makes it a little bit better. So I think they had a beam weapon down there. Missile weapon, 1,372. What is this thing? Can't really tell since the mouse over is just a little bit too tricky here. Anyway, over here we've got our beam weapons dealing 23,203, which is quite a lot considering we just had 6 of them in the fleet there. All of our offensive lasers did 127,292, which is pretty crazy. And our kinetic weapons did 13,849 damage. So about even damage from our kinetics and our beams. You can really tell that like the kinetics under these sort of circumstances just are not effective weapons. But yeah, that basically was a pretty decisive, pretty quick battle. And is a pretty good highlight of how to use the Vodyani fleet in action there. So anyway, I hope you found this episode enjoyable, and of course, as always, I hope to see you guys all next time.